Let's give some energy. 1, 2, 3.
Magic.
Good evening. My name is Richard Powell. I am a transformational trainer and motivational speaker. And today I brought you here to talk about the distinction of speaking versus communication. So what is speaking is the question that I would like you to ask yourself today. Is speaking utterance? Is it a verbal thing? Is it nonverbal? And how do we broach that subject? Today I am going to come from a place of effective and non-effective speaking. I'm going to give you an example right now of effective speaking. I'm going to start with non-effective and move into effective. When I'm being effective, I'm using tone, volume, articulation, and word choice. Raise your hand if you got that this was non-effective on this side. Awesome. Raise your hand if you got that this is effective on this side. Beautiful. So, is it possible that this way of speaking could also be effective? Maybe if I'm talking with a child or someone that's really angry, being quiet, bringing down my volume, and maybe being loud and articulating so strong could actually come across as aggressive. So how are we distinguishing what is effective and non-effective? I propose that it's from a place of purpose or intention in your speaking, which is the verbal utterance that's coming out of your mouth. So there's a distinction between just gobbledygook of coming out, right? Versus actually clear and articulate wording using language that I'm speaking through. Which brings me to purpose. And what is purpose in speaking? Dr. Dan Siegel, who is a neuroscientist at UCLA, has a book called No Drama Discipline. And he talks about purpose in teaching as why am I speaking is the first question I would ask myself. Why am I speaking? Then the second question is, what am I speaking about? And the third question is how am I speaking? How am I speaking? And so I want to bring that to a conclusion for you that there is a strong distinction between communicating. If you notice in both examples here, my body language had nothing to do with it, what my body was doing per se in this. I wasn't speaking through my body or things of that nature. It was literally verbal communication. That there was sound coming from my mouth using language to communicate speaking. There's a big distinction. People think that speaking and communication is the same thing, and it's not. You can communicate in many forms, but you can only speak in one way. And that's through verbal linguistic utterance. And are there any questions?
I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you're saying. So are you saying that speaking has nothing to do with my nonverbal communication?
Correct. Look at radio broadcasting, for example. Someone is speaking on the radio and you're not seeing their body at all.
So, say that I am mute or I'm deaf, and the only way that I'm able to communicate is through sign language. Would you say that's not speaking as well?
That's sign language. There's a distinction between sign language and speaking. And we could go into that if you'd want, when sign language is actually having to do with the body, where speaking is still verbal.
So speaking, are you defining speaking as only verbal language?
Yes.
You're not defining speaking in more of a being state or
from
where
an
people are coming from or anything like that. You're just talking about verbal speaking?
Correct. We're not talking about like the artwork was speaking to me, like using things of that nature. We're literally talking about verbal utterance, the nature of what speaking is.
Okay. All right.
So,
Any other questions?
so what do they mean by actions speak louder than words?
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, that's great, Richard. And then we
Phew.
My heart is like beating so hard.
Welcome to it.
I'm muting myself.
Yes.
Yeah. He's a stud. Awesome it is.
Okay, give me feedback.
Feedback.
So what works for me, there's a lot. I feel trainer when you're up there. In fact, I lost the fact that we're colleagues for a second, and I thought I was in a class. Like your power is on, your articulation's on, your voice can be heard. At least I make up that you can be heard from the back of the room. What didn't work for me is similar to my feedback that I gave Kevin. Is like when there is a road bump, like maybe you mess something up, taking a breath and just re-articulating it. I felt like you kind of like had this eek moment, you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, what do I do now? Yeah, so just being able to flow with the bumps and not being attached to how it looks is, I guess, my feedback.
Thank you so much.
So what worked for me was your power. You took command of the stage, and I was interested, and you had my attention the entire time. And what didn't work for me was when you did the whisper over here, I wasn't sure what you were doing. I thought that you lost your place when trying to figure out the words.
Mhm.
Now that I get it, until you
Yeah.
shifted to the other side, I'm like, oh, got it. So maybe like a tee-up of what was happening here so I could flow with you all the way through. And then you do this thing, which doesn't work for me, this thing that you did with your mouth.
The
A
girlfriend.
couple times like that. What was it?
The girlfriend.
And that didn't work for me. It just kind of like took me out of my experience. And that didn't work for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What works for me is I can tell you put thought and process into what you're doing, which tells me you value my time. At least that's how I interpret it. But what didn't work for me was your movements seemed like, and now I walk over here, and now I go over here, and now I'm going to go over here, and I didn't see you verbalize it, but it was almost like I could hear your mind saying that. And I had the same experience with the whispering. I was like, is he okay? Is everything okay? Anyway, that's my feedback.
My experience, what worked for me with you is your stage presence. It's phenomenal. You command the room. You do that very well. What didn't work for your knowledge of the subject worked very well too. What didn't work for me was this.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like you didn't know, when you weren't gesturing, you didn't know how to put your hands down. And that didn't work for me. The other thing that didn't work for me was your insistence that nonverbal communication is not speaking. That didn't work for me too. Thank you.
What works for me is your power, the way that you stand up there and you own it. I definitely see trainer, you look great. What didn't work for me, as well as the example, I was like, oh man, is he okay? Is he okay? I didn't know what was happening. Also, what does work is I can tell that you really studied this. Like, you did your research, you took time, and you delivered what I felt, here's what doesn't work, was a presentation. So for me, the presencing and being with us was out, and there was like a righteousness about it where it was like, this is what I was studying all night, and this is my presentation, so don't throw me off. I'm doing speaking verbally. This is like an attachment. Didn't work for me.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
Yeah, so kind of to piggyback on Emily and Kevin, what worked for me was definitely your stage presence. It does speak trainer, you know how to dress and present yourself. What didn't really work for me was you seemed to be a little bit too much in your head. And I kind of lost connection in that. And it kind of came off a little bit like I'm more attached to the right way than I am of being effective in speaking. So that's it. Overall, great job.
And two more?
What worked for me, Richard? What worked for not that, obviously. What worked for me is your presence, and there is a connection there. But that's also what wasn't working for me. And I'm realizing that it's like we walk across the threshold onto the stage, and we strip off the live part of us, and we go into mechanics, and that didn't work for me. It was like there was an agenda, this has got to be done, and I'm just going to fucking get through this, I'm going to be done, and go sit down. That's the night
Yes.
Okay.
You're not wrong.
Richard, what worked for me was your presence and your overall command of the room and how you articulate. It's great. What didn't work for me is that I felt like you were kind of playing a role rather than being yourself. And then I also noticed some shiftiness in your moves, like with your hands and you're stepping back and stepping back. I didn't really notice the clicking thing, but just a lot of movements that were like shifty to me that made me sense that you were nervous and thankful.
Staff?
A small comment. The stuff in your pockets is distracting.
Yes.
Like, it's not clean, it's like stuff sticking out. So
I also wanted a quick comment. Ray was my part 1 trainer. And,
No.
This is not quick.
No, right?
And as I was telling Emily the other day, it could have been my lack of experience too, but I couldn't tell he was gay because how professional he was on stage.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think you're very smart, but sometimes I feel like it kind of robs it when you're like training and speaking, because it almost like you don't take it serious. I just wanted to say that.
So what I'm hearing you say is you're speaking into my being gay or feminine as a part of that?
Just the body language,
Okay.
like the girlfriend stuff, you know.
like a looseness.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the looseness.
I got it. I get it. Angie?
Definitely powerful. So much so that I felt your energy drop, and I dropped with you. Or when you lost your time, or actually when you realized that you were out of time, there was like that split second where I plummeted with you, and you're like, questions? So that's how powerful you are, and that's how engaging you were. So be mindful of that. The dancing, I call it dancing, and there is some flamboyantness to you.
So that was present. And also for me, the example, I loved it because it was powerful. You drew me in when you started, like, that spoke to me as to even speaking without words is powerful and you can communicate in that way. And then when you started to define it, that's when you lost me. Does that make sense?
It does.
When you like,
Yeah.
because I got you that it was inefficient to, so I got that. And then you defined it and it countered what you did.
Gotcha. Clear. Staff? Any other staff?
Yeah.
What worked for me was, I mean, you looked the part of trainer, you came out there and you have a powerful presence, and you have the voice, you are engaging. I hear what some people were saying about, like, maybe when you're saying more feminine. I took that as being timid. You're very timid with some of your gestures. It doesn't feel like they're purposeful. And at first it almost felt like you were like a cat on the prowl, like you're ready to pounce on it. It's like you were kind of taking these steps, and I was like, whoa, what's happening? What's happening? I think I got where you were trying to go, but then, I don't know, it seems like you haven't taken the feedback in that everybody else is getting, because you put a whole bunch of stuff in. So I wrote down, as you were talking, there was like communication versus speaking, there was purpose versus attention, there was effective versus non-effective. I got lost, and it was like, and I think Ray said this before to everybody else, he said, use the feedback that everybody else is getting to, and I feel like you just kind of went automatic and did what you were going to do. And if you're going to make it about that's what speaking is, I felt like you needed to give us and say that's the definition we're using today, because you totally lost me. I think there's more of a distinction maybe you're trying to get in there versus speaking versus talking. You know, like I don't know. That's where I got completely lost.
Awesome. Thank you. Ray, Betty, don't know.
Yeah. Richard, what works for me about you is your flair, your power. I actually wrote down that, you know, there's another level of flair, charisma that can come from you, and I think it will come when you relax and get present to what, you know, and feel confident in what you're doing, or confident, maybe that's it. Your physical presentation works for me. What didn't work for me is that, given that we're all here as trainers, I'm listening for how does this distinction support me as a trainer? And that wasn't present for me. And I think you did, you know, I got confused about were we talking about communication or effective, ineffective, what were we doing? And I also think you added things in that were necessary. You know, the exercise was presence, speaking, you know, and you took it in a lot of directions. So. That's it.
Thank you.
You know?
Yeah, that's what
2 or 3 things, Richard. I, like most people, enjoy your presence on stage and the powerful, natural, it seems natural, connection with people and connection with yourself as a person. It feels like that you enjoy being there, that you enjoy connecting and sharing, and that it's like your river. It just seems like that to me. I think you overdo the girly thing. And I'd like to say that there, you know, when I was growing up and going out to the clubs and stuff and doing really flamboyant girly stuff kind of thing, I did that number for a while. And then I noticed a lot of young boys and girls are doing that as if they think they have to be that way in order to be gay. And it becomes a gay thing, but it's not who they are. And I think it ruins who they are, and who they are gets lost in the act. and it sounds, and it seems like you've become the act so much